So Season 2 of Black Ops Cold War is now here, and with it comes two brand new DLC weapons in the Battle Pass, which are the LC10 SMG and the Farah 83 Assault Rifle. Today obviously we'll be focusing on the LC10, and I'll show you guys the best class setup for this weapon, because with the right attachments this weapon is very powerful, super fast killing, and seemingly one of the best SMGs currently in the game. So be sure to stick around until the end of the video to see my best class setup for the LC10. I'm going to have separate class setups for Cold War and Warzone, and I've got timestamps in the description, so if you're interested in only the Warzone or Cold War class setup, obviously feel free to skip to that part of the video, but I would recommend sticking around until the end to see the class setup for both, so you don't miss out with any important tips. And then at the end of the video I'm going to have some general tips as to how to best use the weapon, how to best kind of exploit its strengths and weaknesses. And if you guys need to unlock any camos, for example for the LC10, then be sure to check out my camo guides playlist. I'll have a card for that on screen and a link in the description, so if you need any help with getting the camos done for this weapon, feel free to check that out. And if enough people are interested, I could also make a video specifically for the LC10. But similarly, if you're interested in a great Farah 83 best class setup too, then feel free to check that out. Again, there's a card for that on screen and a link in the description. I'm also doing a Season 2 COD Points Giveaway. If you're interested in winning those, there's rules in the description for that, so feel free to look at that if you guys want to. Without further ado, let's get straight into this class setup though. So we're going to start off with multiplayer, do the class setup for that, then we're going to talk about Warzone, and then we'll talk about some general tips for using this weapon and how to kind of get the most kills with it and go on the best streaks. So for the LC10, in terms of attachments, you're going to want to put on first of all the 14.5 inch Ranger barrel, and this increases your bullet velocity with the weapon. It's got very decent bullet velocity with the base weapon, but adding this attachment obviously increases that to make it even better, so it's going to be even faster killing for the enemies. The drawback to this is that you have a reduced aim walking movement speed, but obviously that's not a particular problem. I don't think it really affects things too much. Plus we're going to have another attachment later on which actually counters this, so it's not really much to worry about. We've then got the Field Agent Grip, which increases your vertical and horizontal recoil control, with the downside being that you get a reduced shooting movement speed, but again, not really a big issue. After this we've got the Vandal Speed Loader for the magazine, and this gives you reload quickness, so you're able to reload faster obviously, but you also get an increased max starting ammo, one extra magazine in particular. It's not the most, but obviously it helps, and it's nice to have both of those benefits. The downside is obviously that you have a very slight reduced aim down sight speed. I think it's about a 6% reduction. Obviously you could go for a different attachment which gives you, faster reload speed and more max starting ammo, but the downside obviously is then you have a reduced aim down sight speed. So if you're willing to compensate for that, obviously feel free to change to another attachment, but otherwise I recommend just sticking with the Vandal Speed Loader. Then after this we've got the Serpent Wrap, and this reduces your aim down sight time, so you're able to aim down sight faster, but the consequence of this is that you have a slower sprint to fire time. But don't worry, because the final attachment we're going to put on is the Raider Stock, which reduces your sprint to fire time, so it makes it even quicker. And you also get increased aim walking movement speed, so obviously that counters the downside from the Ranger barrel. The drawback though to the Raider Stock is that you have a reduced hip fire accuracy by about 30%, but again, hip firing is not really important with this class, so it's not really an issue and I wouldn't worry about that. So those are kind of my preferred attachments. What about the rest of the class? For the secondary, it doesn't really matter what you put on. I personally like putting on a launcher just to kind of, if there's annoying people camping, I can get rid of them, or if there's any kind of equipment or score streaks, I can get rid of it. So I put on a launcher such as the RPG or the M79. You could also put on a shotgun such as the Hauer or Gallo if you wanted, but it's up to you guys. But that's my kind of preference for the weapons. In terms of the equipment, however, I've generally put on a C4. It's nice for clearing out runs, for getting anyone that you can't quite get, or if you need to reload and you're kind of stuck in that reload process but you know someone's there, chucking some C4 can really help with that. So it's really good in certain situations, that's why I love having it on me. And for the tactical, I've put on a stim shot, because you're up close, you're going to be getting shot quite a lot, and if you can quickly dodge behind cover and stim shot, obviously that can buy you time, buy you health, and hopefully you can survive rather than dying. So obviously it's really good in those tight situations. You'll probably see in the gameplay there's quite a few times where I probably would have died, but then I had the stim shot on, so obviously I lived, which is good. So definitely recommend that. In terms of the field upgrade, I didn't really use it too much, but I'd probably put on something like a field mic, because obviously you can see enemies in your vicinity, so if you throw that down you can obviously see all the enemies around you, and obviously it's quite a close quarters combat class, so obviously it's good to know where the enemies are in your vicinity. However, if you find that you're running out of ammo quickly, you could also equip an ammo pack if you need more ammo, so feel free to put on either of those, but again, it's up to you guys what you want to go for. I've then put the perk grid wildcard on, which gives you 3 extra perks, so 1 for each slot. So in perk 1 we've gone for Tactical Mask, which gives you maximized resistance to flashbang and stun grenade effect, and also you're immune to the gas, so that's quite good. So all of the tactical stuff, you don't have to worry about that. I've also put on Flak Jacket, so you take less damage from enemy explosives and Molotov or combat bow flames. In perk 2 we've then got Scavenger, where you can replenish ammo from fallen players. Obviously this also helps to improve the amount of ammo, as this weapon does seem to burn through ammo quite fast. It's not the fastest way of burning through ammo, there are other weapons which use it more, but this obviously does go through quite a lot, and obviously it's an SMG, plus the higher bullet velocity means you are using a lot of bullets, which is good, but obviously you need to be replenishing those bullets. So Scavenger is a good way to do that, but obviously, like I say, if you're still running out, you can obviously put on the ammo pack for the field upgrade if you wanted to. We've then also gone for Tracker in perk 2, and this obviously allows you to see an imprint of enemy footsteps. You can also aim at enemies to reveal them on your team's minimap. Obviously that second benefit is not really as important, but the main thing is the footsteps. When you're up close, it's good to see where people are going. If you see someone's like just dodge through a door or whatever, you can just follow them to go and clean them up. And then for perk 3 we've got Ghost, so you're undetectable by enemy spy planes whenever you're moving, planting or defusing bombs, controlling score streaks, that kind of thing. So it's good for kind of keeping off the radar. And also we got Ninja, so you sprint more quietly and you're resistant to field mic, which is good because when you're up that close, people obviously are going to hear your footsteps and they're going to be more tuned to listening for that, and then that helps them to know where you are. So if you've got quiet footsteps, it's more difficult to know where you are, and obviously it means you're kind of more likely to win certain gunfights. So it's definitely good having that on. And then finally, for these score streaks, it's personal preference, but I liked putting on the spy plane, the attack helicopter, and the harp. Kind of went well with this setup. I don't know, I liked having the harp for sure, and the spy plane, and the attack helicopter was just nice to have a lethal score streak to kind of get me some kills. So you know, it helped with that and taking a few people out. Again, it's up to you guys what score streaks you want to go for, but that was just my preference for that class. Okay, that's all well and good for multiplayer. What about the Warzone class setup? I'm sure a lot of you guys are itching for that. Well, the attachments you're going to want to put on are the 14.5 inch Ranger barrel. It's very similar to the one for multiplayer. It's got very similar stats, it's just a different name, I believe. So it gives you increased bullet velocity, but the drawback is you have reduced aim walking movement speed. We've then got the Raider stock, which increases your aim down sight, firing move speed, and your aim walking movement speed, and also a reduced sprint to fire time. So obviously that attachment counters the Ranger barrel we just put on, but if you put this on, you will have a reduced hip fire accuracy. It's just something to bear in mind. Again, I don't really care too much about the hip firing, so I really wouldn't worry about it. And then I've put on the SASR jungle grip for the rear grip, and what this does is it reduces your aim down sight time, so you're faster aiming down sight, but also you have some increased flinch resistance, which is obviously good when trying to win the gunfight. The downside to this is that you have a higher sprint to fire time, but again, obviously the Raider stock counters that, so it's not an issue. Moving on, we've got the Vandal speed loader for the ammunition, and this gives you reload quickness, so obviously you're able to reload faster, but you have a longer aim down sight time, so you're slower aiming down sight. But again, like I said, obviously we've got attachments that counteract this, so it's not a problem. And then finally, we've got the Field Agent grip as an underbarrel, and this increases your horizontal and vertical recoil control, with a drawback of having reduced firing movement speed and reduced aim down sight firing move speed. So those are the attachments for Warzone. Now let's move on to the rest of the class, and then we're going to talk about some tips in terms of how to use the weapon best and how to kind of exploit it to get the most kills. So feel free to put on whatever secondary you want. Personally, I think it's good if you've got the LC10 as a primary, you could put on something longer range for the secondary. However, the LC10 does do pretty good range, it just doesn't do the very, very, very long range. So something like a sniper might be good for that. You could even put an assault rifle, but I think it's probably best to go for a sniper for the secondary, and then for the primary, obviously you've got the LC10. We'll talk about it later on, but it's quite good for range, so I wouldn't worry about anything in the medium to long range. The LC10 should be pretty good at cleaning enemies up at that distance. So yeah, sniper would be good as a secondary. Put on whatever class setup you want for that in terms of the attachments. But for the perks, I put on EOD in perk 1, so you take reduced damage from non-killstreak explosives and fire. I put Ghost on in perk 2, which makes you undetectable by UAVs, radar drones, and heartbeat sensors. And then for the third perk, I put on Tracker, which means that enemies leave behind a footprint trail similar to that for Cold War. You can also see markers at enemy death locations and hide the death markers of enemies you kill. So in terms of the equipment, I've put on, similar to Cold War, I've put on the C4 for the lethal, so you can take out enemies in your area, and then a stim shot for the tactical, just so that you can heal yourself if you've taken damage but you don't want to die. What I will say though is just bear in mind that the C4 in Warzone, towards the end of Modern Warfare's life cycle, the C4 range got really badly nerfed. It seems that all the characters are so weak at throwing C4 that you can only throw it a short distance, and that's caught me off guard a lot of times where I've gone to throw it, automatically double tapped square or X to like explode it, and then realised it's actually not travelled as far as I thought. So be aware of that. I'm sure people that play Warzone regularly will be more aware of that by now, I'm sure, but for me, obviously, I mainly play Cold War, so obviously it was a bit of a shock, but I'm 100% used to it by now. If you find the range of the C4 annoying, obviously feel free to put on something else, like Molotov or Semtex or something, but that's just what I went for, because it's good for, you know, blowing up vehicles and stuff like that. For the field upgrade, if you're using it in Plunder or something, I would recommend putting on the stopping power field upgrade, because this obviously means that the rounds do extra damage, and it's great to improve the damage to enemies at that further distance. It's pretty good anyway, but obviously it just makes it a little bit better, so you can kill the enemies even faster. So those were the class setups for Cold War multiplayer and Warzone. Now let's move on to how to best exploit the weapon to get the most kills out of it, and hopefully go on some good streaks as well. So to start off with, the gun has incredibly impressive iron sights. You don't need an optic in Cold War multiplayer. That's not too surprising, but the surprising bit for me was that you actually didn't need one in Warzone. Normally I find you do for a lot of guns, but this one you actually didn't, which I was really surprised about. So 100% you don't need an optic. You could put one on, but it's really not needed. So that's really good. Obviously it means it gives you an extra attachment slot, which we've used. It's obviously really great at close quarters combat and at the medium to long distances, and it kills enemies incredibly fast. So it's a really fast killing weapon, but also it kills enemies fairly consistently and reliably. And I'd definitely say that this gun will take out enemies easily at the much longer distances than you might expect. So for an SMG, this does very well for its distance. The amount of times I would take someone out, you know, a couple buildings away, and I'd be shooting them thinking, God, this is never going to hit, it's never going to kill them. And it would either do significant damage or it would kill them, which I was completely shocked by. So definitely you want to be taking advantage of that. If you see enemies in the distance, don't be too scared to use it because it's an SMG. Start firing at them. Although what I would recommend is that instead of just holding down the trigger, tap the fire button to kind of reduce your recoil. Obviously you don't have a lot of recoil, but because it's such a long distance away, the slightest recoil makes a big difference. So tapping the trigger really is effective, and it will kill them incredibly fast. So keep spamming that trigger. You will kill them so fast. The armor will just drop off them and then they'll just die, and the enemies always look so shocked when it happens as well. So it's almost like they don't expect they're going to be killed, which I find quite hilarious. And obviously, like I said, the iron sights do not impede long range engagements like other iron sights might. So don't worry about that. Iron sight is fine, and just keep spamming the fire trigger and you should be really good at those long distances for killing enemies, as you'll hopefully see in the gameplay. Now, I was frequently winning gunfights that I didn't expect to win, or that I feel I would have lost with other weapons, as I've kind of touched on already. So what I would say is be really confident with this class setup when rocking it in Cold War and Warzone. It is good, so let the other enemies know it's good, and let yourself know it's good, so that you hopefully do a bit better in the game. I think the reason why it performs so well is because the increased bullet velocity really does help it, and obviously it's got a really good range. So those two things are really, really good. The gun already has an impressive bullet velocity at base, but this is enhanced obviously when we add the Ranger barrel. So those are kind of the good things about the weapon and kind of how to use it a bit better. What are the downsides and how can we counteract this as best as possible? So first of all, the sprint to fire time. It was longer on the base weapon, but obviously we've moderately improved it with the attachments. This is probably one of the weakest aspects of the class, but bear in mind it's a very strong class and every weapon has to have a downside. As long as you're aware of this, it's not a problem. So bear in mind that it might take you slightly longer than average to transition from sprinting to firing your weapon. So obviously don't necessarily run around every corner, aim down sight maybe before going around a corner, or aim down sight if you think someone's going to be there, stuff like that. Just kind of get you ready for firing the weapon. Doing that will help you kind of counteract that, so you don't need to suffer from having that slower sprint to fire time. But it's honestly even not too bad. So again, I wouldn't worry about it, but if you do notice it's affecting you, that's what I would do to counteract it. But those are my kind of tips for doing better with the class. But all in all, I think this class is an extremely strong one, and I would highly recommend not missing out on it. I know I always say that, but to be honest with you, I really, really, truly do mean it, even more so with this class. So definitely don't miss out on it, guys, because it's incredibly easy to get kills with and go on streaks in Cold War and Warzone. So definitely try it out and let me know your feedback on the class and on the weapon itself in the comment section. I'd love to hear what you guys think of it. Do you like the weapon? Do you not? And also, do you like this class? Have you found it useful? Obviously, thank you guys all so much for watching. If you found this class setup useful, be sure to drop a like on the video to help me out and to help others find this class setup. And if you're interested, I also have plenty of other Cold War multiplayer, zombies and Warzone guides, you know, in terms of camo guides, weapon unlock tips, best class setups, tips and tricks videos, and so much more. So please do feel free to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of my latest Cold War and Warzone videos. Thank you all so much for watching though. Hope you found it useful, and I'll see you guys all on the next video.